So on behalf of the Lancaster Environment Centre, presentations on automated procedure to assist site selection of water harvesting structures. Okay, so first of all, what do we mean by water harvesting? There's a couple of definitions here. There are actually quite a few different ones. This one here, collection of runoff for its productive use, is probably quite a simple and useful one. There are different techniques, different structures when it comes to water harvesting. They all have something quite in common, and they all hold back runoff. They all have a catchment area from which the runoff originates, and it's largely practiced in arid and semi-arid regions. Like I said, they all involve a structure of some kind. Go into that more later on. They all have a benefit, or at least one benefit, and they all lead to increased water storage. Just give some examples here. They can be quite small scale. For example, these micro basins where the catchment area is very small and very close to the point of use, and then they can be larger. Here, the benefits would be agriculture. Also, we can have an earth dam for water storage, domestic use, animal livestock use. Here we have an example where it's a reservoir, but it's also being used for increased aquifer recharge during the rainy season. And also, water harvesting can be used to control erosion. With an erosion problem, you can see some gabions in Nigeria, and a traditional form of water harvesting here in Tunisia, with the dikes and spillways and terraces. The purpose here is to provide conditions for fruit trees and annual crops. So where are they? So like I said, it's associated. Water harvesting is associated with semi-arid and arid land. Here's a map of the globe. So you can see it's quite a considerable area. So over 20% of the land is classified as semi-arid or arid. Okay. So what was our research motivation for this particular project? Well, when it comes to working on a water harvesting structure, you need to find a good site, and often the problem is that there's not enough feasibility done to cover enough sites. All too often, one site seems to be picked by someone on a site, so we don't really know. Often, is that the best site? And so the motivation is could we use GIS to improve the selection process, particularly at the early stages. And then once some of the better sites that have been selected using GIS and remote sensing, that could lead then to more time in the field visits directed towards sites with a better potential. So it would rule out the poor sites early on, and then put more time and money into sites, which would be hopefully would be a better outcome. Okay, so this is done already. Really, there's a lot of using GIS to help with the site selection process, and typically you can divide the criteria used into biophysical and socioeconomic. And GIS is often used, typically not used on its own, but it might be used with remote sensing data or hydrological modelling or part of a multi-criteria analysis, or a combination of these. And in terms of the criteria used, these are the five most common. There are actually many different criteria, but we've got slope, soil type, land cover, runoff, rain. On the socioeconomic side, we've got cost, distance from settlement, and such like. With the biophysical, the most common criteria that is used is slope, and for that, the terrain information is used. A digital elevation model or digital terrain model is used to identify the slope, and that's the most common criteria. So, but there are limitations with slope. The slope value is just for one particular cell, raster cell. It just takes into account the adjacent cells, the 8 surrounding cells of any one cell. So it's not giving you a bigger picture of what the water harvesting barrier may be. So it doesn't doesn't consider the synoptic topography of the site. They're also looking at the slope at one point. It doesn't tell you the benefits of that water harvesting structure, and so it doesn't tell you, well, how much water will this structure or barrier, how much will it retain? And if two sites are the same slope, how do you know which site is the better site? What is the size of the barrier of one site, and what are the benefits of that barrier going to be? So while you can use slope, there's quite a number of limitations. So we set out to create a tool. It's a scoping tool that we could use to reject poor sites at an early stage of the project cycle, and we could focus then more on more favourable sites. This tool should be able to calculate the size of the barrier, how high it is, the length of it, the volume, the storage capacity, how much water could be stored for any size of barrier, any height of barrier, and what is the area of influence? What area is associated with that barrier? We also would want to know is the catchment area. When we put a barrier across a drainage network, there's a catchment area that runs into it. We want to know the size of that. And the tool should be a GIS tool to help the multi-criteria analysis, as we talked about, the other criteria. So we could put the outputs of this tool in and combine it with other criteria. So the tool then, in essence, is try to recreate what is done manually, where we take a sighting point here. If you can imagine this green dash line as the cross-section of a water channel, and if you can imagine, we could then have different barriers running across the channel at different heights above the sighting point. We would then want to find the area or polygon associated with each barrier by intersecting with the contour line, and we could do that for different heights. Each height would have a different catchment area. It would have a different barrier size, a different polygon, and also, very importantly, storage capacity. What is the volume under these areas or polygons when it intersects with the terrain? So, in essence, this is like a part of the tool of how we create a polygon within the model. If we start with the elevation raster, so each point is an elevation, and this you can imagine these darker green colours representing a drainage network and the higher land coming here. And for any one point, we know the elevation. It's an elevation raster, and we also know the flow accumulation because we take into account all the catchment area. And based on the flow accumulation and the user parameters, we can then decide whether are we going to consider that cell as a sighting point, center of that cell as a sighting point, to assess its potential for a barrier. So we also know the flow direction at that particular point, again from the analysis from the elevation data, and we use the flow direction, which is just gives you D8, which gives the eight possible options for any one cell. And the model then, once we know the direction of the flow, we then create an access line perpendicular to this flow direction. And then we also know from the elevation data the contour lines. So we then take a contour line associated with the barrier elevation which we want to assess, and we can then have a contour line with a barrier access line. And that the points where they cross, we create an intersect point. And in this example here, there are 5 intersect points. However, to create, this is the area we're interested in for this sighting point, a barrier across here. So we're not interested in the 3 intersect points on the outside. We're interested in keeping an intersect point adjacent to the sighting point. So we need to remove these 3. So the tool identifies which these points are and removes them, leaving us with just the 2 intersect points, which then allows us to create a barrier across at a known elevation across it between these 2 intersect points, and then we can create a polygon by intersecting the barrier with the contour line. And then once with that polygon line, with the polygon, we can then calculate the volume because we know the elevation below the polygon. So just moving on, this is a flow diagram of the process. All the information is coming from an elevation model, terrain information. So typically an elevation raster of a terrain model, and ideally a terrain model, not a surface model. And then we can see that the flow direction is found from the elevation model, and cells are extracted, and sighting points are created, and then we can create the access points, the intersect points. And in red here we have the 4 outputs, where is the barrier located, the polygon, volume, and the secondary data. Once the polygon is found, we're able then to use another raster and extract data from the polygon from another raster. For example, we could then find out the NDVI for the area of influence polygon. So there's a loop which takes place, and what it does is it takes one barrier at a time, finds the barrier, finds the corresponding contour line, and so creates the polygon, calculates the volume, obtains secondary information, such as the NDVI, and returns. So it does that for every sighting point, and different for every sighting point. Although some sighting points may not create a barrier because of the topography, and some sighting points may just have one barrier, up to 3 barriers in a different model. So there's a loop that goes through, and it basically will go through every single barrier, and obtaining the volume and the polygon. This is a script of the loop. I'm not going to go through every single line, it's just to give an idea of some of the script, some of the key features, selecting the barrier, the contour, selecting the contour, creating the polygon, describe, obtaining secondary information, getting the polygon elevation, and then finding the volume, storage volume of the barrier. And this is a validation we did from some. We used some data we obtained from the dam site in Sudan, where the survey data was done on the ground using a differential global positioning system. And we did this manually in GIS tools. And you can see here that we've got the embankment dam, and at different elevations, we can get what is the water extent, if you like. And then on the right, this is when we use the script tool that we're developing, and we use freely available 90 meter resolution data from the SRTN, which is available. And you can see while there is a difference in quantitative results, this is an expensive survey. It does show that the tool is producing reasonable results, and it is producing, I think, reasonable results in line with more accurate results. And you can adjust the tool to search for different sizes of water housing structures. Here actually the dam is almost 2 kilometers in length. The other case study we did, this was using LiDAR data, high resolution LiDAR data in Ethiopia, and we searched for. So we were asking ourselves, within this area of interest, where are the best sites for a particular dam? So we'd like to look for a dam between 1 meter and 6 meters in height, but no greater in length than 60 meters. So we put this into the model. And the first thing it does, we also then said, well, we define the catchment area at any one site, minimum and maximum catchment areas, and it produces a stream order map of the site. We decided here to search all the stream order level 4 sites, which are in dark red here and here. And so all those stream order 4 cells are then converted into sighting points. So these are each red dot is a sighting point, which will then be assessed for its suitability as a water harvesting point for water harvesting structure. You can see here it's also picked up some, sort of on the bottom of the picture, some agricultural land. So it's also going to assess the ability of the agricultural land for a site. Okay, so now we get some of the results, and you can see here the results. The results we're looking at is relationship between the storage and barrier volume ratio. And you can see at the top of the stream here, there's no possibility of a site here. On the agricultural land, there's nothing at all. But you can see down here that there are storage to barrier volume ratio, and you can see here that each site produces barriers, like I said, up to 3 barriers per site. And here again, it's the same data, but this time in using hotspots analysis. And again, it's quite clear. You can see now the benefits of the GIS with the agricultural land. And you can see that the top reach of the river has got a lot of cold spots, but there are some red spots. So on the next slide, I'm just going to highlight the bottom reach of the wadi. And you can see here, again, clusters of red, which are the better sites. And these are the sites you possibly might want then to look at more detail as a site visit. There's one site in particular here with this cluster of barriers, which has got comes up with 5 barriers with the greatest hotspot score, and it also contains the site with the largest storage to barrier volume ratio. And there's the results for the sort of the best site with this particular parameter. The different parameters that the tool is giving: barrier length, the storage volume, the polygon of the flooded land behind the barrier, and some of the ID points here that the tool uses to work through the loop. And you can also see here, again, with the benefits of GIS, the potential for a natural spillway into this adjacent channel. And so the outcomes, we've got an automated process that's capable of assessing thousands of sighting points. We've got the area of the barrier, calculate the area of influence, the flooded area. Can calculate up to 3 barriers at different elevations. The results are georeferenced. They've got different barrier parameters of height, length, and volume. Calculates the catchment area. The supporting raster information, such as NDVI, and then we can use criteria such as the catchment area to cultivation area ratio, storage capacity to barrier volume ratio, and barrier height and length. These are sort of things we could use then to say whether it's a site that's worth investigating. And the results are all within a GIS environment, so we can consider the other biophysical, social, economic, and environmental factors to make a full decision. So possible developments, identify linkages between land cover and water harvesting sites. Is there a link between NDVI and better sites? At the moment, this tool is really only used for ex situ water harvesting sites, but it could be used for in situ water harvesting sites. Might be a possibility to use a tool to identify cross-sectional profiles of the drainage channels, which could then improve hydrological modelling. And would also like to use the tool in the field with an agency working in this sector to identify sites. Okay, I think that brings me to the end. I want to see everyone. Thank you very much.
I might have missed it, particularly with the sound problems, but how do you get the initial seed points, the initial locations that you put the barrier at? Is that automatic, or is that
it's a result of the user parameters. The user selects the minimum catchment area and the maximum catchment area, which then creates a stream order map. and then you can decide which of those stream orders you want to consider. So in that particular example, we only considered stream order 4, which was this. But you could, in theory, you could run the model through as the stream orders 3 or 3 and 4. So there is some user task to be done. To say, well, okay, we'd like to look at this particular area. But you could change the catchment area to reduce it. You could then run the tool in a small part of the catchment. Use the same tool. Then you'd use different catchment settings, maybe different stream order settings.
But more general question: how tied is the algorithm to the environment of ArcGIS? Have you considered porting it to other GIS packages, in particular some of the the free ones open? Was it JumpGIS or some such name, and QGIS and PostGIS?
Yeah, we haven't. Yes, I mean that was one of the things, thinking of a GIS tool, that it would be easier possibly to make that leap between ArcGIS Pro, for example, and an open source software, rather than doing something in MATLAB. So yeah, I mean, I think that if there's a demand for it, then I think that would be.
It struck me that something like GRASS, for example, or PostGIS, which I'm familiar with, or even the sort of web, you could maybe develop a web tech approach which has TurfJS or WPS using GeoServer. All of those, I think, could allow you to offer it to a wider audience, and therefore you might get bigger uptake and more feedback.
Yeah, definitely.
So from Rob, any plans to explore applying the technique at a much smaller scale, e.g. flood attenuation interventions for natural flood management?
Well, we don't have any plans to do any flood management. It's really just for water harvesting. That was sort of why it was set up. But possibly it could be used for flood management. I mean, on a smaller scale, I guess what really is a question of the quality of the data, the resolution data. In this example in Ethiopia, we've got very good data, high resolution data, where you could identify quite small water harvesting structures, for flood management, using small structures. But I think that the limiting factor, possibly would be the quality of the data.